Paws Cross Oceans. The True Story of a Brave Tabby Cat. By Joseph Bassarin and the Little Girl. Copyright page. Paws Cross Oceans. The True Story of a Brave Tabby Cat. Copyright 2025 Joseph Bassarin and Little Girl. All rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, distributed, stored, or transmitted in any form or by any means, photocopying, digital, mechanical, or otherwise, without the prior written permission of the authors and publisher. Cover design Joseph Bassarin. Cover photo Joseph Bassarin. First edition. 2025. This book is based on real events and people. Some names and details have been changed for privacy. Printing and distribution rights in Turkey are reserved. Joseph Bassarin. Toronto, Canada. 2025. Dedication. To Little Girl, my brave and beautiful tabby with emerald eyes and an unbreakable spirit. You crossed oceans not only to find a new home, but to show all of us what true courage and love look like. This book is yours. Every word, every memory, every heartbeat within these pages belongs to you. To all the cats across the world, those who roam freely under distant skies, those who curl into loving arms, and those still waiting for kindness, you remind us every day of grace, resilience, and the quiet power of a purr. To every caretaker in the streets of Karşıyaka, Izmir, Toronto, and everywhere in between, those who open doors, hearts, and cans without expecting anything in return, you are the unsung heroes who make their journeys possible. And most especially to my beloved wife, whose boundless compassion turned a neighborhood gang into a family and made Little Girl's extraordinary journey across oceans a reality. The love you hold for her, for all of them, is the soul of this story. With endless gratitude and love, this book is dedicated to all of you. Forward. From a cry in the streets of Izmir, a path from heart to heart. Some loves begin with a glance. Ours began with a cry. On an ordinary October afternoon on a dusty side street in Karşıyaka, Izmir, while searching for a lost kitten, someone else found me. A tiny tabby, no more than 6 months old, came running out of nowhere, crying, rolling, playing with my fingers, then settling into my arms as if she had been waiting for that moment her entire short life. Laughing, half joking, half serious, I asked, "Would you like to come home with me?" She purred, pressed closer, and answered without words, "Yes." Finally, from that moment on, she had a name, Little Girl, and I had a companion who would change everything. What followed was a year of pure joy. Dawn hunts, midnight motorcycle signals, lap cuddles, proud mouse offerings, and a bond deeper than I ever thought possible between a human and a cat. Then came the hardest choice of my life, to leave her behind as I returned to Canada, believing that the streets she knew and loved would be kinder than a new life in a cold, unfamiliar country. For 3 months she waited, returning each evening to an empty apartment, searching for the family that had vanished. For 3 months we carried the weight of guilt across an ocean. And then, against all odds, through the kindness of strangers, the loyalty of family, and an extraordinary Turkish friend who carried her onto a plane, she crossed that ocean to find us again. This is the true story of a small tabby who refused to let the path between our hearts be broken by distance, time, or doubt. It is a story of love at first sight, heartbreaking separation, an impossible reunion, and the quiet daily miracles that happen when a street cat decides you belong to her, and proves she will move the world to keep it that way. Welcome to Little Girl's journey. A brave soul whose paws carried her farther than most humans would dare. Guided by one simple, fierce belief. Family finds its way home. Turn the page. She's waiting for you too. Introduction. Little Girl, a cry in the streets of Izmir. Some encounters arrive like destiny. It was a cool October afternoon in Izmir, Turkey. The air carried the scent of the sea and the hum of city life as I walked through the familiar streets near our apartment, softly calling into doorways and narrow passages. Days earlier, another small kitten had gone missing, and as I searched, my heart felt heavy with worry. Then I heard it, a thin, determined cry cutting through the noise of traffic and footsteps. I turned and there she was, a tiny tabby girl, no more than 6 months old, charging toward me as fast as her short legs could carry her. Her fur was patterned with classic swirling stripes of brown, black, and hints of orange, dusty from street life but glowing in the afternoon light. Her green eyes were wide and fearless, full of curiosity and stubborn hope. She threw herself at my feet, rolled onto her back, and began playing with my hands as if we were old friends. When I leaned down, she gently bit my fingers, not to hurt but to test. Adventurous, intelligent, emotional, stubborn, gentle and aggressive at once. Funny, strong and full of personality. Every contradiction wrapped into one small, fearless soul. I picked her up and she fit perfectly in my arms. Warm, calm, certain she belonged there. Without thinking, I asked out loud, "Would you like to come home with me?" She paused, blinked as if surprised anyone had asked her permission, then leaned into my chest and purred. Yes. We took the elevator together. When I opened the apartment door, I smiled at my wife and said, "Look, I found a new kitten." From that moment on, she had a name, Little Girl. She burst into our lives like a joyful storm, running from wall to wall, eating with us, claiming her place as if she had always lived there, and falling asleep on the couch like it was her own. She loved food, loved birds, chased and caught mice, climbed trees and ruled the outdoors with confidence. At night, she curled into my lap and drifted into sleep, purring. Every evening around 9, she would want to go out, to hunt, wander and spend time with her neighborhood companions. We would watch from the balcony. She would look back and meow to let us know she was okay. When she was ready to come home, she would proudly sit on the motorcycle by the main entrance and call for us. I would go down to get her, and she would step into the elevator on her own, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. When my mother visited, Little Girl became even more excited, jumping, running, showing off. We took her to a veterinarian in Izmir, and had her spayed so she wouldn't cry for male cats. Every day around 6, when we returned from work, she would be waiting for us, spending her days outside with friends and her evenings with us. We lived like this for 10 beautiful months. Then life intervened. It was time to return to Canada, and we didn't know what to do. We considered leaving her behind. We even consulted a woman who fed many neighborhood cats, thinking Little Girl could stay with her and live freely among them. But the woman surprised us. She simply said, "You must take her with you." We hesitated. On the morning we left Izmir, around 4 o'clock, we took Little Girl downstairs one last time so she could play with her friends. She thought it was a normal day, a routine morning. She believed she would see us again. We got into a taxi and headed for the airport. She watched us leave. That evening she waited for us. The next day and the next and the next, returning to our apartment, looking up at the balcony, hoping. For nearly 3 months she searched for us. I called my brother, who lived in the same city, and asked him to check on her, to feed her, and to let her know she hadn't been forgotten. He sent photos. I smiled through tears. I began looking for ways to bring her to Canada. I even planned to fly back to Izmir myself. Then one day, a friend volunteered to bring her to us. It felt like a blessing from Almighty God. This is a true story. The story of a brave tabby who waited in empty streets, crossed an ocean, and taught 2 ordinary people what unbreakable love truly means. This is Little Girl's story. Welcome to her world. Chapter 1: The First Day at Home. Before Little Girl entered our home, she entered my life in the streets of Izmir. It was a cool October afternoon. I was walking near our apartment, softly calling out as I searched for another kitten that had gone missing days before. Worry sat heavy in my chest when I heard a sound that didn't belong to traffic or people. A thin, determined cry cutting through the noise of the street. I turned and she came running. A tiny tabby kitten, no more than 6 months old, charging toward me as fast as her short legs could carry her. Her small body moved quickly, unstoppable. Dust clung to her silky fur, striped like a little tiger, and her green eyes were wide with urgency and courage. She threw herself at my feet, rolled onto the ground, flipped onto her back, and began playing with my hands. When I leaned down, she gently bit my fingers, testing, playful, careful not to hurt. Funny, brave, completely fearless. I picked her up. She fit perfectly in my arms, warm and calm, as if that was exactly where she belonged. I looked into her small face and without planning it asked, "Would you like to come home with me?" She paused, blinked, looked around as if surprised anyone had asked her opinion, then leaned into my chest and purred. Yes. She arrived home like a declaration. From the moment she stepped into the apartment, she behaved less like a rescued kitten and more like a small, confident person who had finally found the right address after a long detour. Her short, silky fur shone like the coat of a miniature tiger, soft to the touch, yet clearly designed for both beauty and battle. Every stripe felt intentional, as if nature itself had dressed her for both grace and survival. Her name came effortlessly. She was small. She was a girl. And so she became Little Girl. A name that carried both simplicity and strength. My wife suggested we take her to the veterinarian early and have her spayed. I agreed in theory but delayed in practice. Everything felt too new, too alive. I didn't want to rush her transition from street soul to home companion. Inside, she was endlessly entertaining. She sprinted from wall to wall as if measuring the apartment, leaped confidently onto furniture as though it all belonged to her, and inspected every corner with sharp curiosity. She had opinions, strong ones. Doors should open when she decided. Food should arrive immediately. Sleep should happen exactly where we were sitting. She loved food. Not politely but passionately. Yogurt and butter weren't snacks. They were experiences. She licked slowly, deliberately, like a gourmet tasting something sacred. Turkish sukuk excited her beyond reason. Fish made her forget the world entirely. She ate with the intensity of someone who remembered hunger and had sworn never to face it again. Despite the safety of walls and ceilings, Little Girl never fully accepted confinement. At heart, she was a street girl. The outside called to her constantly. We lived in an apartment building surrounded by Izmir's unwritten cat society. Cats gathered like small street gangs, each group claiming territory through invisible borders and silent agreements. I still missed them. One stood above the others, solid and confident. My wife named him Sylvester because he looked exactly like a cartoon cat. Big, bold, and slightly intimidating. We fed them all every day. Little Girl belonged to both worlds. Inside, she was playful, stubborn, loving, and funny. Outside, she was fearless. A hunter. A climber. A social being who understood street politics better than we ever could. Every morning around 7 we would leave for work. Little Girl would walk with us, head high, tail up, escorting us like a guardian. She followed us step by step down the street until a certain invisible line. There she always stopped. That was her territory. She would sit, watch us, and cry. Not out of fear, but because she refused to abandon what was hers. We would continue and she would turn back, returning to her kingdom with a mix of dignity and protest. One day we noticed blood on her tooth. Panic came instantly. I placed her in a box to take her to the veterinarian, and she made her feelings very clear. This was unacceptable. I cut a small hole in the box. Immediately she pushed her head out, watching the street as we walked, alert and curious, supervising the journey. The veterinarian smiled. It was just a baby tooth. It would fall out. Nothing to worry about. Relief followed us home. Our days settled into a rhythm that felt permanent. She spent her days outside. Hunting, playing, negotiating her place among the neighborhood cats. Around 6, she would be waiting for us under a parked car. She knew our footsteps. The moment she heard them, she would appear as if summoned, eyes bright, tail raised. Some nights we came home late. After swimming at Izmir's beaches, after long summer evenings that stretched beyond intention. And still she waited. Patient. Certain. As if the day was incomplete without us. For nearly 10 months life remained this way. Simple, joyful balance between freedom and belonging. We didn't know how rare those days were. We only knew we were happy. And so was she. Chapter 2. The first days at home. Little Girl's storm. The moment we stepped through the apartment door, it was as if a small hurricane had been unleashed. I gently set Little Girl down on the living room floor, and she paused for exactly one heartbeat, ears twitching, eyes scanning every corner, before switching fully into exploration mode. She shot across the room like a cannonball, her paws barely touching the ground. 1 second she was under the coffee table, the next she was leaping onto the back of the couch, then sliding across the tiled floor like a clumsy skater. She bounced from wall to wall, ricocheting off furniture, chasing invisible prey, and occasionally attacking her own tail with pure feline delight. We couldn't stop laughing. Our quiet home, which had felt a little empty after losing track of the other stray kitten, suddenly came alive, filled with the clicking of tiny paws, playful meows, and the occasional crash of something not quite secured. Some highlights from those chaotic, wonderful first days. Food discovery zone. Little Girl was a natural-born foodie. We placed a small bowl of cat food down, and she attacked it with such enthusiasm that pieces went flying. She ate as if she had never seen food before, which, coming from the streets, might not have been far from the truth. And water? Forget a boring bowl. She preferred dipping her paw into our drinking glasses or licking directly from the tap when we turned it on for her. Stubborn little thing. She would sit there staring until we woke up, the couch thrown in lap claiming. Once the first round of zoom eyes ended, around midnight thankfully, she discovered the couch. She circled it twice like a lion claiming territory, then sprawled right in the center and declared it hers. Later that night while I was reading, she climbed onto my lap, kneaded a few times with her sharp little paws, and immediately fell into the deepest, loudest purring sleep. She was aggressive in play, stubborn about bedtime rules, but oh, when she chose to be, she was so gentle. The evening routine begins. At around 9 on that first night, she started pacing near the door, meowing insistently. She wanted out. We cracked the door open, and she slipped into the hallway as if she owned the building. From the balcony, we watched her join the neighborhood cats under the streetlights. Every now and then, she would glance up at us and let out a small chirping meow as if to say, "I'm fine, humans. Go back to your boring indoor life." When she was ready to come back, usually after a few hours of hunting and socializing, she would sit proudly on the motorcycle at the main entrance and call for us. I would go down, pick her up, and she would step into the elevator like a pro, returning straight into our arms. Those first days flew by in a blur of energy, cuddles, and small chaos. Little girl wasn't just adjusting to our home. She was turning it into hers. She was funny, fearless, emotional. She would meow dramatically if we stayed out of sight too long, and already showing the perfect mix of wild street cat and loyal companion. We had no idea how many more adventures and heartbreaks and miracles lay ahead. But in those early moments, watching her curl up on the couch or zoom around our legs, we knew one thing for certain. She wasn't just any cat. She was our little girl. Chapter 3. The Queen of the Neighborhood. Little girl ran our lives according to her own flawless schedule, one that began long before the sun even considered rising over Izmir. Every morning around 5, while the city was still wrapped in quiet darkness, she would wake, stretch, and decide it was time for the household to rise. She would step lightly across the bed, paws on my pillow, and begin her gentle campaign. A soft paw tapping my cheek, light as a feather. A polite request for breakfast, and for the door to be opened. If I dared pull the blanket higher and pretend to sleep, her politeness would evaporate. The taps would grow firmer, more insistent. Then came determined headbutts, small but sharp claws kneading my arm, and finally, a full body drop onto my chest accompanied by a loud, offended meow that clearly meant, "Human, your laziness offends me. Get up." Resistance was pointless. I always got up. Breakfast was non-negotiable, hers first, then ours. Once her bowl was filled and emptied with enthusiastic speed, she would take position by the door, tail flicking, eyes locked. Winters in Izmir are mild, and the early mornings are usually warm, so she would slip outside into the cool, promising streets. She ruled those streets like a small striped monarch. Her kingdom stretched across Karşıyaka, a neighborhood known for its remarkable kindness toward street cats. Residents and the municipality alike built small wooden shelters beneath olive and orange trees, placed water bowls in shaded corners, and left piles of food for any cat in need. Sylvester's group was cautious but loyal. When my wife and I stepped outside, they would appear from streets and rooftops, approaching slowly, tails low, eyes wide, with that perfect mix of hope and caution only street cats master. We always carried food in our pockets, just in case, and would scatter handfuls with quiet joy. One in particular, a beauty with a white chest and soft brown belly, became our favorite. She would glide forward more bravely than the others, sniff our offered fingers, then claim her share. Our walks often took us past a magnificent lilac tree near the building, its branches heavy with fragrant blossoms in spring. That tree was headquarters. Sylvester and his companions loved to rest beneath it, grooming one another or watching the world with half-closed eyes. We would stop, softly call their names, and wait to see who would appear first. A few doors down stood a wonderful boutique pet shop run by people who truly loved animals. My wife was a regular there, stocking up on the best food for little girl and treats for the outside group. The owners would always ask about the little queen, and share which cats had visited that day. At the nearby market I had my own ritual. I would buy Turkish sukuk or fresh lamb for little girl. She adored rich meat. And as I stepped out with fragrant bags, a small delegation of street cats would be waiting at the door. Their noses twitching, their eyes fixed on me with heartbreaking politeness. My soft heart never resisted. I would tear open a corner of the package, drop some onto the pavement, and watch them rush forward in joyful chaos. Their happiness was instant and absolute, and mine followed, but I always hurried home to deliver the rest to the true queen upstairs. Some of the sweetest chaos came when my mother visited. The moment the doorbell rang, little girl would transform into a furry whirlwind. She would ricochet from room to room, bounce off walls, leap onto beds, and skid across the floor in manic figure eights. My mother would clap her hands and laugh, shouting, "Oh look, little girl has completely lost her mind." And we would all collapse into helpless laughter as the little Tabby performed her joyful circus for her favorite audience. Every evening at 9, the day's adventures would slow. We would bring little girl inside for a late snack, and she would settle into her rightful place, curled on the couch or in a lap, before drifting into a final sleep until 5 in the morning. She was wild and gentle, fierce and loving, independent yet deeply loyal. The streets of Karşıyaka were her kingdom, Sylvester and his group her court, and our apartment her palace. And every single day without exception, she reminded us who was truly in charge. Chapter 4. The Extraordinary Hunter. In Izmir, little girl wasn't just a cat who hunted. She was a hunter who happened to be a cat. From the moment she slipped out the door at dawn, the streets and gardens of Karşıyaka became her personal hunting ground. Birds learned to fear the flash of tabby stripes among olive branches. Mice disappeared into their holes the instant her shadow crossed the pavement. Even the bravest sparrows fluttering around the lilac tree knew to scatter when a certain small queen appeared. She moved with a patience and precision that contradicted her playful indoor personality. I would watch from the balcony as she tracked a pigeon across a rooftop, body low, tail still, every step calculated. Then lightning. A burst of speed, a graceful leap, and the bird would explode into the sky just in time, leaving little girl empty-pawed but completely unbothered. She would sit, clean a paw, and glance at me with an expression that clearly said, "I let it go." Obviously. Her favorite hiding spots were beneath the parked cars lining our street. She would slip silently under a sedan or delivery van, completely invisible to passing people and the occasional wandering dog. Only the tip of her tail might give her away, twitching with anticipation. She loved the scent of cars, warm rubber, engine oil, the faint sharpness of exhaust, and would press her nose to the tires, inhaling deeply as if reading the day's news from every vehicle that passed through the neighborhood. From those shadowy shelters she would launch her ambushes. A passing cat would suddenly be pounced on, a striped blur bursting from beneath a wheel, sending the startled victim tumbling with indignant, fluffy protests. The game never lasted long. Both cats would separate, shake themselves off, and walk away side by side as if nothing had happened. Before sunrise, while the streets were still painted in shades of indigo, little girl followed her secret routes. She ran along the low walls dividing buildings, perfectly balanced on narrow concrete edges, then disappeared into the backyards of neighboring apartments. I would catch glimpses of her silhouette against the fading night, tail high, ears forward, before she dropped into darkness, swallowed by ivy and shadow. I never knew what mystery she chased there, but she always returned in time for breakfast, bright-eyed and satisfied. Sometimes, to our mixture of pride and mild panic, she brought gifts. A small mouse, trembling but unharmed, carried gently in her mouth and placed at our feet like an offering. She never killed them, only captured, delivered, and then sat back waiting for praise. We would carefully release the bewildered creature outside, and little girl would watch its escape, flicking her tail with something close to disappointment, as if she had arranged a playdate that ended too soon. Not far from our apartment was a small park, the very place where I had first found her crying alone as a kitten. She never forgot. That park remained her favorite daytime territory. She would climb her special tree, an old olive with twisted branches that formed perfect perches, and survey her kingdom from above. From there she hunted smaller creatures. Lizards darting across bark, insects buzzing through leaves, anything daring to catch her sharp eye. Hours would pass with only the slow turn of her head, The world reduced to a rhythm of tracking, pausing, and striking. Trees in general were her watchtowers. Thin orange and olive branches that seemed too fragile somehow held her as she climbed higher and higher, chasing birds or simply claiming the best view. The descent was always faster. Either a chaotic scramble or a controlled slide that ended in a dignified landing, immediately followed by a grooming session to restore her composure. Even indoors, the hunter never fully slept. A dangling shoelace became deadly prey. Toes moving beneath a blanket triggered ambushes worthy of a nature documentary. Houseflies on the ceiling earned long, intense stares followed by spectacular leaps into curtains or lampshades. We learned to secure anything fragile, because little girls' attacks were sudden, powerful, and joyfully unapologetic. Yet the same paws that could dispatch a mouse with swift efficiency would, minutes later, knead my lap in a gentle rhythm as she settled in, purring. The fierce green eyes that tracked birds across the sky softened into contented slits when she curled against my chest. Aggression and affection lived in perfect balance, wild instinct wrapped in loyal love. In those Izmir days, hunting wasn't just something she did. It was who she was. Strong, intelligent, fearless, and utterly magnificent. What we didn't know then was that those very skills, her cunning, her patience, her ability to disappear and reappear, would one day help her survive alone on those same streets for 3 long months, faithfully waiting for a family she refused to forget. Chapter 5. Gentle Moments in Family Life. Amid all the wild hunting and street adventures, little girl had a completely different side. One that belonged entirely to us and to the quiet warmth of home. Nothing calmed her more than settling into a lap. The moment someone sat on the couch, she would appear as if summoned, leap up with a soft chirp, circle twice, and curl into a perfect striped ball. Her purring would begin instantly, deep, steady, vibrating through whoever had the honor of serving as her pillow that evening. She would knead gently with her front paws, eyes half closed in total contentment, then drift into the deepest sleep imaginable. On cooler nights she would burrow under the blanket. On warmer ones she would stretch across thighs and chest, claiming every available inch. If a lap was occupied when she wanted it, she would simply stare until its current owner surrendered or made space. She also had her own throne. A small worn armchair tucked beside the window. From there she would observe the living room like a watchful monarch, head high, tail neatly wrapped around her paws. Afternoon sunbeams were essential. She would stretch luxuriously in the light, roll onto her back, and doze with one ear turned toward whatever we were doing. On days when she didn't feel like going outside, rare but it happened, she would ignore the door entirely and head straight for a lap or her chair, announcing her preference for indoor comfort with a soft trill. I built her a small green cat house, a cozy fabric cube with a round entrance, and mounted it on the wall beside the chair. She claimed it immediately. She would disappear inside for long private naps, with only the tip of her tail visible, flicking lazily. Sometimes she would peek out, green eyes glowing in the dim interior, checking that we were still nearby before retreating again. That little house became her sanctuary, a place where even the bravest hunter could feel completely safe. When my mother or brother visited, the apartment turned into her personal racetrack. She would gallop from room to room like a tiny horse, her paws clattering on the tiles, leaping onto beds and tables in joyful loops. My mother would laugh and shout, "There she goes again, completely out of her mind." Little girl would skid to a stop, look around with bright eyes, and immediately launch into another round. Their visits were cause for celebration. She seemed to understand that guests meant extra attention, extra voices, extra hands to pet her. Food was serious business, and the kitchen table was her stage. Without hesitation she would jump up, sit politely at the edge, and fix us with an unblinking stare that clearly said, "I am ready." Before her main meal, I would always give her a small treat, some butter or a plate of milk, rituals she expected and demanded. The moment the butter knife appeared or the milk carton opened, her tail would whip with excitement and her meows would grow more insistent. She would lick gently, whiskers forward, completely absorbed in the pleasure. For a cat who spent most of her life outdoors, she was remarkably clean. She handled her business outside, in gardens and among trees, and returned spotless. The indoor litter box gathered dust. She used it only in emergencies, and always with an air of mild disgust, as if it offended her dignity. Some neighbors in the building, oddly enough, didn't like seeing her roaming freely in the hallways. To keep the peace, we bought a sleek black carrier. Whenever she wanted to go out or come in, I would place her inside, carry her down in the elevator, and release her at the main entrance. She learned the routine quickly and never protested. She knew exactly which floor was ours, which door was home, and she never got lost. The carrier simply became a small part of her day, a brief pause before freedom or indoor comfort. While I was teaching at a nearby school, we kept an eye on her through a small camera we had set up. The footage was both funny and heartbreaking. Little girl suddenly sprinting through rooms, crying at the door, clearly bored and missing us. She would leap onto her chair for a better view, stare out the window, then dramatically collapse onto the floor as if loneliness had become too much to bear. But the moment we returned, usually around sunset, her favorite time, the apartment came alive again. We would open the door and hear the thunder of tiny paws. She would race down the hallway, tail high, weaving excited figure eights around our legs, rubbing her cheeks against our ankles, meowing non-stop. She didn't just want food, though food was always welcome. She wanted us. She would follow us into the kitchen, sit in anticipation, and the moment we reached for the treat bag, she would go wild, dancing on her back legs, chirping, her eyes shining with pure joy. Those evenings, with her once again in a lap or on her chair, watching us as we ate, everything felt right. The fierce hunter of the streets became our gentle, loving companion, faithful, waiting, choosing us every single day. She turned our apartment into a home, and our hearts into her forever territory. Chapter 6. The Heartbreaking Farewell. After nearly a year in Izmir, 10 months in which little girl had been the bright, beating heart of our days, we made the decision that would change everything. It was time to return to Canada. The news fell over us like a shadow. Little girl, happily unaware, continued her perfect routine. 5 a.m. wake-up calls, dawn hunts, afternoon naps in her greenhouse, evening treats and lap cuddles, completely convinced she had finally found her family. She had no idea we were planning to leave. The question of what to do with her consumed us. I desperately wanted to take her, but doubt gnawed at me. Would she adapt to a new country, a new home, a new culture? And the winters, Canada's harsh, snowy winters, how would a street-born Tabby, who had thrived in Izmir's mild warmth, survive them? My wife and I spent restless nights going over the same question again and again. One evening we walked to a small nearby park. We sat on a bench at dusk, watching the cats roam freely and happily. From a nearby house, a kind-faced woman emerged carrying bowls of food. The cats gathered and ate contentedly under her gentle care. I approached her politely. "Good evening," I said. "We see how well you take care of the cats." "It's wonderful." She smiled warmly. "Yes, it's our duty. I love them." Then her face clouded. "But I'm a bit sad today. A cat I care for hasn't been seen for days. I hope she comes back." "I'm sorry," I said. "I hope she returns soon." My wife greeted her from the opposite bench, and the woman came over to chat while the cats ate. I explained our situation. We adopted a small tabby little girl, but now we are returning to Canada. We don't know what to do with her. She listened carefully, then spoke calmly with conviction. "A couple from Norway had the same situation. They took their cat with them. You should do the same. Don't leave her." I explained my fears about the cold climate. She shook her head gently. "That shouldn't be a problem. Cats adapt. But more importantly, it would be unfair to this cat. Either you never take her, or you care for her until the end." Her words struck deep. I knew she was right, but we still hesitated. My wife and I came up with a plan. Perhaps little girl could join this woman's colony. The next evening, we carried her to the park in the black carrier and let her out. At first she explored curiously, sniffing the air, watching the other cats from the bench beside us. But after a while she lost interest, walked back to the carrier and climbed inside on her own as if saying, "I'm ready to go home now." My wife looked at me and sighed. Well, at least we tried. Days passed and the departure grew closer. My sadness deepened even more when one of my closest friends suddenly passed away in Bursa. I wanted to attend the funeral, but the distance was too far. I carried a double grief in my heart. The loss of a dear friend and the coming loss of little girl. We packed our suitcases in the living room. Sensing something unusual, little girl turned the open luggage into a playground. jumping in and out, burrowing under clothes, popping her head up with playful curiosity. While our hearts were breaking, she was making us laugh. My wife watched her and said softly, "Poor little girl. She doesn't know we're leaving Izmir." Just like the gray cat in Istanbul. We had once half-adopted a gentle gray cat in a complex garden in Istanbul, and left her behind when we returned to Canada. She was well-fed and safe, but still the memory lingered. Maybe one day I will write her story too. The night before our departure, we couldn't sleep. Little girl curled between us as always, purring in complete trust. Our flight was at 7 a.m. We had to leave the apartment around 4 in the darkness. We woke quietly. As always, little girl woke too, thinking it was her normal pre-dawn routine. I gently placed her in the black carrier and took her downstairs one last time for her morning needs and a quick hunt. She ran out happily, completely unaware. When we came back up, we gathered our bags, locked the door for the last time and stepped outside. She was there with her group, Sylvester, the shy white and brown beauty, and the others, playing under the streetlights, carefree and content. She looked at us with bright eyes, expecting the usual return later that evening. We got into the taxi. I closed the door. I caught her gaze through the window, one last long look. She tilted her head, then turned away, certain we would be back as always. As the taxi drove off, I watched her in the rearview mirror until she disappeared. Guilt settled into my heart instantly. That evening she would wait for us. The next day and the next, faithful, hopeful, confused. That was it. We were gone and little girl was alone. What we didn't know then was that her unbreakable love, and a miracle yet to come, would bring her across an ocean back to us.